And trusting teams is really important. And so what trusting teams mean is that the employees trust the company trusts the employees, and the employees trust each other. And when you have trusting teams, this sort of magic occurs as a result. Well, all of that put together got me to the point of employee supremacy. And it's a contrast. In an Inc.com interview, Simon Sinek talks about about shareholder supremacy. And there's a lot of history behind that. But basically what shareholder supremacy says is that as a leader of a company, you are doing everything necessary to contribute all the profits to the shareholders of the company. And what that does is it creates a lot of short-sighted thinking. We need to hire, we need to hire 3 salespeople. Let's just go hire 10, and then let's just hack off the 7 that don't work out, and we'll keep the 3 best ones. Well, how does that work towards trusting teams? Doesn't. So we're talking about employee supremacy. Instead of decision-making being in for the shareholders, now what you're doing is saying, let's make all of our decisions towards the employees. How do we benefit the employees? How do we make sure they trust the company? How do we make sure that we're making decisions, let's say, simply around benefits? If you're under shareholder supremacy, you're like, oh, no, we can't give them any more benefits than we absolutely have to. When you're looking at employee supremacy, you're saying, let's give them the benefits that make them feel solid, secure, that they can provide for their company, give them the compensation necessary so that they can feel secure, so they trust the company, and they do what's in the best interest of the customer and also in the company. As a child, I'm the youngest of 6 siblings, and my oldest sibling is 22 years older than I am.
Wow.
So there's a big stretch. And when around our dinner table were the most important figures were my dad, who was a fairly well-known journalist in Washington, D.C. By the name of Stuart Alsop, and his brother, my uncle, Joe Alsop. And they wrote a column that went back into, because I was such a young kid, they called me a do-it-yourself grandchild, so that my parents were much older. And it was raucous argument about political policy and theory and things like that. And so it was very formative and very lively. And as a small kid, I don't know that I jumped in very much because I don't think I could add much, but I listened a lot.
Yeah. And did you find that interesting too? I mean, I think a lot of kids, may be bored by that. I mean, but was that conversation kind of interesting to you at the time?
I would say it was definitely interesting. It was hard because around the table were always people who really understood politics and understood all of the nuances behind it. So they would get into these incredible discussions, sometimes arguments, heated discussions about things that, as a small kid, I didn't even know what was going on. So I found it interesting, and it kind of kept me participatory in what was going on, but definitely it was harder to kind of break in because I was a little intimidated. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah. No, I love that. Love that. And were you exposed to any type of entrepreneurialism as a child? I mean, I guess being a reporter is somewhat entrepreneurialistic, right? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. My dad, Stuart, was definitely an entrepreneur. He wrote a column. He was the only time he actually worked for Newsweek and wrote the back page article every week. And I think that he was employed by Newsweek at the time, but very much he and my uncle were out there traveling the world looking for stories, and they were submitting stories to the Herald Tribune, and then it was getting syndicated. So he was very much an entrepreneur, but actually I have 2 brothers. Joe Alsop, the oldest brother, who was 22 years older than me, founded and took a company public called Progress Software. Oh, wow. And then my 3rd oldest brother, Stuart, is a well-known venture capitalist in Silicon Valley and has done quite well as well. So, and the funny thing is that all of my siblings and I joke that none of us have really ever worked for companies. All 6 of us, in one way or the other, have always worked for ourselves. So I would say there's a lot of entrepreneurial blood that came down to me.
I love it. Yeah, that's fantastic. So did you do college, regular school path?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. I'm a graduate of the College of Business and Economics at West Virginia University.
Okay.
Really enjoyed it. It was a really good school that has graduated several well-known entrepreneurs who went on to build great companies. And that's kind of, I actually dropped out of college and started a bar and restaurant in Morgantown, West Virginia.
Oh, wow.
And that was my first entrepreneurial pursuit.
Yeah.
I had this thing. I guess I'm one of those people that maybe kind of knew very early on what he wanted to do. I had this dream of opening a sandwich shop at the end of our driveway,
Okay.
but at like 12, and
Yeah.
then I had
Yeah.
newspaper routes, and I borrowed $100 from my mom and bought a lawnmower and paid her back in the first day after I just mowed a bunch of lawns. So I've always, and then when I got to college, I said, I'm ready to start a business. So I ended up
Hmm.
opening this bar and restaurant. Total failure. I
Yeah.
lost everything doing it, but it was, I think I probably learned more out of that than I did going to business school. Just trying to start something like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Love that. So what did you do after the bar restaurant thing? Did you?
Well, it was funny. I had to go back because I
Yeah.
dropped out of school. So I ended up going back. And I ended up going back to business school, which was so cool because here I had the experience of running a
Yeah.
business and
Sure.
I'm in these business classes. Now I'm 2 or 3 years a little bit further ahead than the other students. But they're looking around like, wow, you actually ran a business. So I was so engaged in those last years because I
Hmm.
wasn't just kind of viewing what they were teaching us as theoretical. It was actual practical,
Hmm.
information that I needed. And I had a couple of the professors that knew that I had started a business and asked me to kind of teach a class or just talk about what it was like. So I ended up going back to school afterwards and getting my degree after having had that experience.
Hmm.
And then after that, I said, okay, I'm going to be in the restaurant business. That's where I want to go. And that turned out after about 2 years, I realized, nah, actually, I'm not really into the restaurant business. And
Hmm.
I have so much respect for anybody who can run a restaurant profitably.
Yeah.
Because you look at it and you say, well, what's a restaurant? It's, you serve food, you serve drinks, you just like make people happy and stuff. It is a hard business. It is
Yeah.
not easy. So I have a ton of respect. So after that, I ended up basically getting into technology. I had been in technology all along and really enjoyed technology, but then I moved out to Santa Fe, New Mexico, where I am here, and I started a business with my brother, and that
Hmm.
was all in
Hmm.
technology.
Yeah, I love it. So you've had a lot of exposure into, different types of businesses and, schooling sort of in the middle of all of that. I guess that kind of, does that lead you to where you are today? And we wanted to talk about the employee supremacy concept theory and driving companies that are looking to create a different atmosphere, in their companies. Do you feel like all of the different exposures, all of the different businesses that you've been involved in has helped you realize that maybe there is a different way to run and manage business today that is different than what a lot of people have traditionally run their companies before in the past?
I'd say 110%. Um, because I guess I've been living in the shadows of my two brothers.
Mhm.
One who took venture capital from New Enterprise Associates, big fund and everything, rolled that up, not rolled that up, but then took that investment and then launched a company that eventually went public and is now worth $3 or $4 billion on the Nasdaq. That was formative. And then of
Mhm.
course I have my other brother who's a venture capitalist. So my whole idea was I want to start a business. I'm going to bring in boatloads of venture capital once it starts to become successful, and I'm just going to blow it up.
Mhm.
And that really was kind of had a lot of impact on me. And so I've gone through several businesses. I had a few here in New Mexico. And then the company I have now is called The Receptionist. And The Receptionist is a visitor management company. I came upon it because I had decided I wasn't able to make a business run in New Mexico. So I ended up moving my entrepreneurial life up to Denver, even though I still reside in New Mexico. And I networked and everything else and ended up finding this business. And then when I found the business, I went to my two brothers. And the one, Stuart, the venture capitalist, said, I don't think you really need a lot of capital to make this business grow. It's going to throw off a lot of cash. It's a SaaS business. SaaS businesses have a tendency to throw off a lot of cash, and I think you probably can do it without having to blow it up with a lot of venture capital.
Mhm.
And that was as if somebody, one of these people who were the ones that I looked up to, said, "You don't have to do it the way you think you've had to do it."
Yeah.
And so it was like this release for me. I was able to just say, okay, I'm going to do this the way I want to do it. And all my previous businesses, I thought I had to bring in, and I was pitching VCs and doing all this other stuff. So I ended up basically taking this business and, very entrepreneurially at a folding table in Industry Denver, which is a big co-working space in the north side of Denver. It's me and a sales guy who came over because I acquired the business, very tiny at the time. It only served I don't know, 150 or so locations, and we started at a folding table and ended up kind of running it the way you would normally an entrepreneurial business. You just got to get stuff done. You're running it. You're doing everything you need to do, but it wasn't until further down into the history of the company, when it was around 2017 and 2018, that somebody told me you should read the book Traction, or The Entrepreneurial Operating System by Gino Wickman. And so I read that and I really devoured it. And at that time, we had a small leadership team. There were three of us. And I went to the other two members of the leadership team. I said, can you read this? And what I'd like to do is to start running the company under Traction. And the thing that Traction tells you is the first thing you have to decide is, what are your core values? You have to decide, what is that? And up until that point, I was like, core values, s'more values. I don't really like core
Yeah.
values, whatever. It's
Yeah.
stuff you put on walls and stuff. I learned a huge lesson of how incredibly important that was. And so we ended up adopting our core values after a bunch of exercises and really working hard on it. And it's called Fabric: fun, authentic, bold, respectful, innovative, and collaborative. And they speak to what we do. And all of a sudden, as we're bringing on employees, we now are hiring those people who share the same core values. And it made a huge amount of difference. Take our journey just a little bit further forward, and then we get into The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. And The Infinite Game gets us to something that you have to determine, what is your just cause. And there's a long story there, but it's too long for me to describe. But we got to our just cause. And our just cause is to build a world where a company's profits fuel the mission to be in service to its employees and the community. And I know that sounds like a lot, but when you unpack it, it basically says, what we want to do is to build a world where companies are saying, instead of, we're going to fuel the investors and the shareholders, we're going to fuel the employees. And why do you want to do that? You want to fuel the employees because when you have happy employees, they do a better job with the customer. They are taking initiatives that they take on their own without having to be told. They can be trusted. And there's this concept behind The Infinite Game and Simon Sinek's work, which is trusting teams. And trusting teams is really important. And so what trusting teams mean is that the employees trust the company trusts the employees, and the employees trust each other. And when you have trusting teams, this sort of magic occurs as a result. Well, all of that put together got me to the point of employee supremacy. And it's a contrast. In an Inc.com interview, Simon Sinek talks about about shareholder supremacy. And there's a lot of history behind that. But basically what shareholder supremacy says is that as a leader of a company, you are doing everything necessary to contribute all the profits to the shareholders of the company. And what that does is it creates a lot of short-sighted thinking. We need to hire, we need to hire 3 salespeople. Let's just go hire 10, and then let's just hack off the 7 that don't work out, and they'll keep the 3 best ones. Well, how does that work towards trusting teams? Doesn't. So we're talking about employee supremacy. Instead of decision-making being for the shareholders, now what you're doing is saying, let's make all of our decisions towards the employees. How do we benefit the employees? How do we make sure they trust the company? How do we make sure that we're making decisions, let's say, simply around benefits? If you're under shareholder supremacy, you're like, oh, no, we can't give them any more benefits than we absolutely have to. When you're looking at employee supremacy, you're saying, let's give them the benefits that make them feel solid, secure, that they can provide for their company, give them the compensation necessary so that they can feel secure, so they trust the company, and they do what's in the best interest of the customer and also in the company. So that's how it came about to this whole idea of employee supremacy.
Mhm. And there's a lot that can be unpacked there as well. So when you started deploying this, in your own companies, um, you obviously started this at a certain point. So you're probably running the company the way that it traditionally a traditional company was run, and then you started going down this other path. So you kind of have this perspective where you knew the old way and you knew the new way. What were some of the things, some of the realizations that you came to, or maybe your staff started coming to, the employees started coming to? What were some of those changes, some of those realizations that were expressed during that transition period?
Well, and I think that's a great question, because what happened was, I was running this company under more shareholder supremacy and like, we're going to blow this thing up, and then deciding and making that decision, I don't actually have to do that. And I've always wanted, it's always pained me how employees are treated. So previously, and this is the thing, I always use this by example, is what I think is really important. Under shareholder supremacy, what ended up happening in the past, and I didn't even know that's what it was called, but that's the way I knew things were being done. I just didn't have a name for it. What was happening was you'd have to make a decision. I already used the benefits and the compensation and, insurance and things like that. Something just happened recently in our company, and it was just like a light bulb moment. So we went back, my director of sales and I went back, and we have a fairly, good sized sales team, but for one of our sales members, or sales team members, we're calculating commissions in a spreadsheet, something we're actually changing over right now. But there was a calculation error in there about a specific type of sale. Now, it benefited the company and it didn't benefit the employee. Now, under shareholder supremacy, you would be met with this saying, I have to do everything that is in the interest of the shareholders. Well, it's in the interest of the shareholders not to disclose that we made that mistake and we shorted the employee. And that's the short-sightedness of shareholder supremacy. What we ended up doing was, and my director of sales and I looked at each other and we said, we operate under employee supremacy. There's not even a question of what we have to do in this situation. We calculated what the amount was. We went to the employee as quickly as we possibly could, apologized for the mistake we made, and said, we're going to be adding this to your next paycheck. And the employee was like, wow, I talk about trusting teams. They knew, that employee now knows we're not going to go and do things. The ick factor is what I call it, And so I think that's the difference. The other thing was that we were running this thing, and our leadership team, and we were always felt very important that we did well by our employees, but we didn't have a name for it. We didn't know what it was. And I credit Simon Sinek, because we did the infinite game and we ended up hitting on what our just cause was. And it was like this moment when we decided what our just cause was. And this was only in the middle of I guess it was towards the beginning of 2021 of last year. And when we hit on what our just cause was, there was silence in the virtual room, because we're all doing this on Zoom, but there's this silence of, we just hit it. We actually know what we want to do. We know what our mission is. And then we delivered it to the employees, and they're like, and what employee is going to say, no, don't focus on me, but knowing that the company trusts them and wants to see them thrive, we all of a sudden, there was just like, now we know what we're doing. We didn't have that just cause before. We kind of knew it. So that was kind of the difference between then and now.
I love it. I love it. And yourself as one of the leaders of the company, how does this help you, in different situations as well? I mean, we kind of just went through this, but I guess what I'm kind of thinking in the back of my head is, you can go through this exercise and you can say this, but if you still approach an employee or group of employees in, a condescending type way, which, I see this all the time, in other businesses, and that where, I guess there isn't a genuine, um, uh, deliverable when you're presenting yourself to someone else. You're saying you're going to do this, but then you quite honestly come off as an asshole when you're talking to your, employees. There's obviously there's a a way that you would need to present yourself as well, so that the employees do trust, in that process, and trust that, yeah, you know what, they are different, they do have our back, they do trust us. So I guess, do you have any thoughts on, what you would need to do as a leader to make sure that you're portraying this approach in the best light, or in a way that, is going to be, uphold what you're presenting, that this is the way that we're going to run the company?
Well, yeah. So that is, I think what you're getting at, what I hear is when you're running under shareholder supremacy, because the whole idea of shareholder supremacy is that everything that we do is for the benefit of the investors and the shareholders. It sets aside the fact that you've got employees who are actually doing the hard work.
Yeah.
I'm talking to you right now, but my team is back there working with customer support and doing the sales and doing the operations and the billing and all that stuff. I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
And so the problem is, there's a point of view. Shareholder supremacy is like, I, as the shareholder, am the most important person here, and you are lucky to be working for me and getting a salary. And that's what gives you that kind of sense of like being an asshole, because you're looking at the employees as somebody who is basically a cog in a wheel that is helping me to make money. And that's what I find so kind of deplorable about shareholder supremacy is, I don't know, better.com was an example from about 6 weeks ago, where the CEO of, and now he almost got fired, but then of course the board didn't want to fire him. But this guy fires 900 people over Zoom in a 15-minute call, and then says some absolutely terrible things in email to them. And that's somebody who's saying, you're lucky to work for me. And if you take that attitude, yeah, that's really what you're going to get. You're not going to get trusting teams. I can't imagine that an employee of better.com is saying, I really love working for this company that's making worldwide headlines about all of the awful things that they've done and how they've treated their employees. That's going to hurt their recruiting. So I think it is definitely a mental shift that is required to be able to say, your employees are actually the ones that are sitting in front of the customers, having to make decisions about what's best for the customer. And you're not the one doing it. The people on top are the leaders, and usually the ones with the most. I'm the biggest shareholder in our company, right? And if I take that perspective that I'm the biggest shareholder and you're working for me, and you're just screwing up left and right, that's basically shareholder supremacy. But I want to raise shareholder value, and I think the best way to raise shareholder value is to treat those employees the best you can, so they can feel safe, they can feel secure. Because in the end, they're going to stay with the company. Only one person has voluntarily left my company since I started the company. So that means all that tribal knowledge, all of that information about processes, procedures, about customers, it's all still here. Because we have had to let employees go because they might not have been good fits in traction terms. They might not have been in the right person or in the right seat or whatever else. So we've had to make some changes there. But only one person has voluntarily left, meaning the people are still there around the table who know what's going on in the company, as opposed to, let's just fire 900 people who we spent millions of dollars training and getting them to know exactly what happened. Then we'll just get rid of them. That's shareholder supremacy. So I don't know, does that answer the question?
It does. Yeah, it does. And I think what it is, if you're truly going to adopt something like this, you need to make sure that you're reflecting on your own life and being cognizant of how you're presenting yourself to your staff. And it might not even necessarily be you might not even necessarily be addressing the staff directly, but even if they see you doing something else that doesn't necessarily align with that mentality, in the back of their head, like you said, that they're not going to feel that trust. Like, what if he just turns on me someday? Or, what happens if I'm that person, at a certain point? So you really need to be, very much so conscious of how you're presenting yourself, throughout the entire process. So with that being said, I mean, was this a big shift for you at all? Or was this sort of, always in your heart that you always felt like this is the right thing to do, but maybe this is the way that it's done. This is the way that we've always done things before in the past. Was it more like, yeah, this just feels right and I don't really need to shift myself? Or was there some things that you need to learn about yourself and shift the way that you're presenting yourself?
I think it's very much what you said, I think would be the latter, in the fact that I felt like I was running a company. I knew it had to be under shareholder supremacy. And I know that I'm going to need to take these actions, and it's not going to feel good. It's going to feel icky. It's not going to feel, it didn't feel right for so much of my career. And so the shift that did happen was, for a long time, I luckily had also brought on people on my leadership team who felt similarly about me, about my view towards employees and stuff. And therefore, as a result, were in support of it, so that I didn't have to make a big shift like, oh God, now I got to get rid of half of my leadership team because they aren't on the same boat as I am. And so that, I think, it was almost like, as we discovered our just cause, I sleep better at night, because I now know that I can do things that are in the best interest of the company. And it's not just that I do it for the employees and for our community as well, just because I want to be altruistic. It actually goes to the bottom line that I know the value of this company is far greater than if we were just, churning and burning employees and doing things like that. So we're building a really solid company. And in the end, I'm the biggest shareholder in this company. So if I can actually do that, then I'm benefiting myself, but not in a way where I'm the focus of it.
Yeah.
Where everybody's doing that. And I think it comes down, you brought up something, which it comes down to actions. That action, when one of our salespeople is shorted, says volumes. The salesperson had no idea that it existed, but they could have had, maybe 2 or 3 years down the road, discovered the mistake and said, what happened? And had we had knowledge of it previously, and that employee found out about it, that person would have just said, well, I guess this company doesn't really care about me. They care more about themselves and the bottom line. So it's that kind of thing where you take the right action. You don't take the icky action. You're doing things that will then make the employees more engendered to say, I really am behind this company. I want to see it succeed. I'm not telling them, you need to know that this company is going to succeed. They're actually wanting to do it themselves. It actually gives us all a cause where we can all work together.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned the just cause a number of times and how things were silent, when you guys finally, arrived at what that just cause was. Do you feel like you attracted, you mentioned that you didn't have to go through and change a lot of people around. Do you think that you sort of intuitively, before you really arrived at this, before you had all of the core values and all of that, were you intuitively attracting people or hiring people, who were based off of your, sort of your guiding principles, if you will? You felt like they were, sort of aligned, and now you have a structure that you can absolutely say, yeah, this is us. But before it was guessing, and we're lucky if we can find somebody that I feel like I connect with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I'd say there's almost 3 stages to the company, maybe. There's the beginning stage. I mean, so now we've been around for like 6, almost 7 years. And in the first couple of years of the company, I had a couple people who I hired, and we were butting heads all the time. Because I was thinking shareholder supremacy, we have to grow. We're going to go out there and get venture capital. We need to build the dev team. We have to do this. And we just spent a lot of time butting heads. And then there was kind of the second phase of the company where we did finally achieve not achieved, we developed our core values, and we felt strongly about those. And we felt a kind of a commonality in terms of how we wanted to treat our employees, that type of thing. And then there's the third stage, which is when we actually decided what our just cause was. In that second stage, we had determined traction, and we knew how to operationally run our company, because that's what traction is all about.
Right,
It's all
right.
about, determining how do you run meetings and who's in the right seat and who's the right person and all this other stuff. But it was when we actually came and decided that we were going to be kind of playing the infinite game, as Simon Sinek talks about it, and putting in our just cause. That was the third phase, where I feel like things have smoothed out so much. It's a joy to run this company. Most people you talk to who are running software companies are just tearing their hair out. They've got all of these personnel issues, and they've got all these other things, and they're working ridiculous hours. I honestly am having a great time running this company. We're growing. We've got a couple of initiatives that we've come up with, not just my ideas, but the work of the leadership team and the whole team, that I am really excited about, and where we're going in the future. And so what I keep telling everybody is, if you don't believe what we're doing, watch our growth and see if we can actually take this model and grow, but do it in a different way. And the funny thing was, you said there's people who might be addressing their employees as like, there's assholes and all this other stuff, or being assholes or whatever. And it's like, what I keep saying is that you really, we're not going to be able to change the companies. We're not going to change Google, right? We're not going to go and change Chase. We're not going to change all of these big companies. What I want to do is impact the entrepreneurs. I want to impact the Google entrepreneurs of today that are going to be running the companies that are worth billions of dollars. And they say early on, this is how we're going to run our company. And that's what I want to do. And I go on a lot of podcasts because I want to talk about this. I think it is so important, because there is an impact if employees feel solid, secure about the companies they're working for. I said in one podcast even that I even wonder if we couldn't even go back to a place where employees aren't hopping companies every 2 years, or every year, that we actually, I have employees who have been working for me for over 6 years now. And I think that is a testament. Wouldn't it be great if you could be at a company, thrive, and not have to feel like, oh, I got to go to this other company because they just hired 30 people, or I was part of a layoff because, they missed their quarter or whatever. I think there's got to be a better way to do it. And that's why I keep talking to everybody about this.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. If people want to learn more about you, your philosophies, your company, what would be the best way to reach out and get in touch?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn is probably my biggest medium, and that's Andy Alsop. I think I'm one of the top Andy Alsops that comes up on LinkedIn, hopefully. And it's just Andy Alsop is, when you put in the LinkedIn name. AC Alsop on Twitter, AC Alsop on Instagram as well. And then, of course, the receptionist.com. And what we're doing is putting together a 5-part series on employee supremacy, going from the beginning of us discovering our just cause all the way through the progression, and then talking about how you can implement it at your company. We're just about to record that episode. We have something called the Fabric Podcast. I think that is very worthwhile taking a look at. And it's within the Fabric Podcast that we're starting this 5-part series. And I just encourage people, if they're excited about this concept, is to look up the Fabric Podcast and look at that. I think that's been great. And I'm my email address is on the website. I don't hide myself, so I'm always looking forward to people reaching out to me. And I've had a lot of people reaching out to me and saying that's a really interesting concept, and tell me more about it. So
I love it. I love it, Andy. This is fantastic, and you're absolutely right. I mean, the changes that you're making today and spearheading today can absolutely create a huge impact. A few years from now, when the people that you're able to plant these seeds grow into the next Googles, or the next huge companies. And hopefully, like you said, we'll have employees, staffs that are much more fulfilled, which that has a huge trickle down effect in all areas of life then as well. So I love the messaging, love the thing you're trying to accomplish. So kudos to you, congrats, love it.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
No problem.